Cape Breton is full of cameras. How many Murphys are there in Newfoundland, do you think?
Oh, God. There's a population, I suppose, that represents the elite of our province. It's chiefly composed almost entirely of Murphys.
Is that right?
It certainly is.
Every good Newfoundlander is named Murphy.
Just about, apart from the O'Briens.
Is that right? Those are the two names to know out there.
Well, Murphy's really the only one to know.
Well, as we like to say, what's Thursday without Rex? On this Thursday, something a little different. Rex is here, but it's not what's on his mind, but what's on yours. We asked for your questions for Rex, and we sure got them. You ready for this?
I'm not ready, but we're going to do it anyway.
Okay, first question from Paula Yanch in Bayside, Nova Scotia. Have you ever in your career interviewed a politician where you asked a direct question and actually received a direct answer?
You don't know how sad, Paula, that question makes me, for two reasons, really quick. I go back so far that I was around, I think, when they put out the tender for bandages for the mummy. That's how far back I go to thinking about politicians. You know something? With one exception, I'm going to tell you the name. No politician you've asked a really direct question, you know this kind of stuff too, gave the really direct answer unless they were from out of country. The only exception, and it's true exception, I make with Peter Lougheed when I had him on checkup. Peter Lougheed, I could not get the idea that he was saying anything that he would not say over his own table.
Was this while he was premier? No.
Unfortunately, I had to put that qualification in there. It was afterwards, but it really was direct and from the heart.
Yeah, what I found is that when they first come in, especially leaders, when they're first elected leader, they answer your questions. First interview.
And it's gotten worse, by the way. In the old days, they might lie, but today they're on this spin of talk points, and they can't do anything.
It's like they come out of that first interview and their handlers say, "What are you doing?
You're talking
you
to
can't
people.
Answer that question.
No, you're not supposed to speak to people.
Exactly.
Stop it."
All right. I know it really upsets, and you know it really upsets viewers when they don't answer, and even when you keep going at them, they still don't answer. All right. Next question. And this one's coming in from video. Watch this.
Hello, Rex. This is Ernest from Ottawa. I'm concerned that Canadians have lost trust in their political institutions. If this is true, what can be done to fix this issue? Thank you.
Well, Ernest, you got the biggest problem with the age, and it's not just Canadians losing its trust, it's losing it across the board. And it's not just politics, it's the full institutions. It is worse now. It is worse now than previous generations because the multiplication of media means that everybody has a connection. And second, we forget this. How much government in its full range of activities has spread out over the board. Everyone has a connection as opposed to, say, 1900. So now when you can't trust them, it's reaching into your own backyard. And it isn't. It's maybe the 60s are part of it. Maybe you go back to the Reformation. Maybe you go back to Rousseau. But the idea that institutions had an automatic prestige and people in high office did. One last point. Even in the old days, you know, the days of, in my case, Smallwood or Pearson, if you criticize them, you'd criticize that awful Joe, that son of a, you know, but I respect the office of the Premier, or I respect the office of the Prime Minister. Thrown that completely by the board. And, you know, people like me are partly responsible for it.
Well, you know, that is the other half of it. You know,
it is the other half.
And the media in general, and the way politics is covered.
Very, very much so. We're not yet, and what we are tending, we're not yet at the stage in the States where some of the stuff that goes on, cable television in particular, in the States about politics, shouldn't be allowed on a stage. And two, the division into camps. If you're a conservative and I'm an NDP, we're not just disagreeable people among each other. We're enemies. That's nonsense, by the way.
Yeah.
But they're going into camps is kill politics.
You know, I so recall when I started covering Ottawa in the mid-'70s. And, you know, they'd go at it on the floor of the House of Commons, opposition, you know, the conservative opposition, the Liberal government. They'd really go at it hard and tough.
And they meant it.
And they meant it. But at the end of the day, they were still friends. And, you know, you don't often see that. You do sometimes, but you don't often see it anymore.
True enough.
All right, next question. This comes from David Marnock and Valerie Scott in Vancouver. Mr. Murphy, sir, with respect, but because we are that nosy, please tell us if you've ever been approached by the Harper government with regard to a Senate appointment. And if offered, would you accept?
I've been sending up smoke signals to Mike Duffy for the last 15 years, and none of them have been responded to. Serious answer, no. He's too sane. B, no, 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 and no. No, it wouldn't fit. A, I don't want it. B, I think it's a very bad thing, hello, Mike, for journalists to jump across the river in that dramatic a fashion. It really is, for both sides. Thirdly, as I say, I understand some senators do really good work. I like Mr. Kirby for his work on mental health. So I'm not just, spitting at the institution, member institutions.
Right.
But the idea that people who are in this antagonistic relationship with the public government then accepts at the end of it a sinecure that is the gold coin of Canadian politics, it just doesn't go, Peter.
This says something about how many Canadians feel about the Senate, because we get this question all the time.
Yeah.
You get it all the time. Oh, yeah, you're just angling for a Senate seat, like we'd want one. All right, here's the next question. Jane Bickus from Saskatoon. I always enjoy your astute, generous, and erudite comments. Did you grow up in a family that fostered these qualities? Is Jane one of your sisters here?
Well, I was going to compliment Jane, first of all, on her own powers of analysis. Jane, they are superb. I could not agree more. But, no, seriously, to answer the real question, the family, yes, and it's an interesting point that I think she's probably intuited. My father, and I'll make this brief, and I'm not having an Oprah spasm, I'm not going to share with you, but I will tell you this much. My father only got as far as grade 3. He grew up in real poverty, which is the interruption of the necessities of life for protracted periods of time. He didn't have what he should have had. And when he was an adult, and when I became an adult about the age of 50, I actually looked back on this and I realized that the deepest regret in my poor father Harry's life wasn't the absence of income, wasn't the long hours of work, was that when he became an adult, he realized that if he'd had an education, he really could have profited by it. And I think by implication, he put that into the sensibilities of most of us, and he certainly got me. I have a benign contagion from my father for the things of learning. And if I have any credit, and I'm not sure I do, incidentally, it'll go to him.
Yeah. Saying, we had a different upbringing, but I was lucky that my parents always wanted to discuss current events, public affairs, around the dinner table and the kitchen table in the morning. Next question, coming from Calgary. Watch this.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Ella Malloy. I'm 12 years old from Calgary, Alberta. My family recently took a trip across Canada and we visited all the beautiful provinces. My favorite was Newfoundland. My question for Rex Murphy is, where is your favorite place in Canada and why would you go back?
Favorite place?
Well, Ella, I'm really glad you like Newfoundland, and I think my favorite places, you gotta tell the truth, I still think my favorite places in Canada are Newfoundland. Even in fog I like it, okay? If I'm given a secondary answer, Ella, if I'm allowed to say that, I like some of the northern parts of Alberta where, because of occasional talks I've been. And as a city outside of St. John's, I like Vancouver a lot.
Well, you covered a lot of turf there,
I tried to
which
actually,
was a wise answer.
I'm going back to some of these places.
Which is what I would do as well. I'd add the north, and that's me. I love the north. Going through the Northwest Passage, I'll tell you, it's not a city. No. Obviously. There are not a lot of people. But it is spectacular.
There's so much that's spectacular. There really is.
All right. Dennis Choptiani, Markham, Ontario. Sorry if I got that name pronounced wrong. What is the most interesting interview that you had in the past year and why?
That's an easy one only because it was with John Crosby. I'm not playing the Newfoundland cards. I'm not. I do a lot of interviews on cross-country checkup. I mean, a lot. So a year is a long time. And I went through this. I took the question seriously. Well, we went down to do this piece on the moratorium, which is coming up, and also on John Crosby himself. And we spent about an hour and a half. And this guy, approaching 80, I presume, is just like a Roman rocket. And the best moment, if I can share it now and actually anticipate the piece. Yeah. I said, here you are, Mr. Crosby. You were a very powerful family, but I know. But, you brought down Joe Smallwood. You had free trade. You almost made the leader of the PC party. I said, you must feel pretty big about all this. And he turned to me, and I'm quoting. And he said, well, what about you? He said, you little Placentia bastard. There's no interview in the world. That's worth 50 Geminis, and he delivered it with that sly smile. All the room was laughing behind me, but I couldn't, of course. But, no, the best interview, John Crosby, and right now, by the way, he does speak directly.
It's going to be a great couple of items that you're doing. They're coming up in a few weeks. I'm lucky enough to see parts of them. And the Crosby interview is stellar, and there he is wearing his sealskin vest
and bow tie. And I think he had a harpoon behind his chair.
All right. Watch your monitors. Here's the next question.
Hi, I'm Todd Sexton from Dawson Creek, British Columbia. Hey, Rex, what's a fellow like you do for hobbies?
What do you do for hobbies?
Well, no one likes me, so I have no friends. So that takes care of that. No social life whatsoever. Tell you what I do for hobbies. This is a hobby. And secondly, to be really deep in classical music is equal with literature. I'm going to say BAFTA. Equal with literature. I've been intoxicated with classical music since I was 10. And even yesterday, I was sampling 3 different versions of the first movement of one of Beethoven's lesser works, just to see how they're playing it. I like it so much, and it's the only power greater than wordplay.
He's kidding, by the way, about the friends. He's got lots of friends, good friends. Howard Quinn, White Rock, British Columbia. I'd like to ask you, Rex, the same question that Peter asked the Prime Minister in London. There is a feeling of impending doom and gloom in terms of the European economy. How bad is the situation? And in your view, what should be done about it? This is Rex Murphy, the economist.
Well, not only the economist, but social observation. If you go back to the last century and you try to find the times when world stresses were reaching some sort of crescent and that they were intersecting, something in Spain was hitting something in Quebec. I have no gifts as a prophet, but I will say this, that we're at a moment when the tensions are so ripe, and we've had such a long period since the Second War, and the idea of street politics has become once again the kind of thing that it was. I make no projections, but this is the only time that I've seen in my span as a journalist in which the kind of wild actions that precipitate genuine crises are present. We've had other times, we've had war measures here, we've had all sorts of stuff, Afghanistan. But the world itself is in a very anxious period, and it has been extended. And our leadership, and I mean Obama as well as our own, the leadership of the world is not equal to the stresses that are being presented. I think it is a very interesting and possibly dangerous time.
We're going to take a break in a moment, but we're going to try and slip this one in on that unhappy note. This question, Paul Jones from Ile-Perrot, Quebec. Rex, I know you were a Rhodes Scholar. Mm-hmm. Rhodes Scholar, Rex. Were the years spent at Oxford useful to you? Were they enjoyable? Looking back, how would you rate the experience?
They were extremely useful. I was supposed to be studying law, but I'm drunk on literature, so I went to all the English classes. I met some of the... I used to read textbooks. I did a master's in English. I used to read textbooks of the great scholars, you know, doing the 17th century poetry. They were standing on platforms over in England giving lectures. The authority on T.S. Eliot, the woman who wrote his biography and his first criticism, was giving a lecture on Eliot. Who's going to go to law school? So I said, this is just too good. And I probably read more in my time at Oxford than I've ever read since. So yeah, absolutely enjoyable. And it is one of the great central points of all of Western culture.
Wasn't it roughly around the same time Clinton was there?
Yeah, but no one noticed Clinton. I was the star.
But did you inhale?
I did. I tell you what I did do. I sat in the same room with Bill Clinton.
Did you inhale?
No, never did. Never did. But I sat in the same room when we watched the 68 election. They sent a tape over to Rhodes House, and they invited the American scholars to watch the 68 election. And I'm interested in politics, not American. I went to that. So he was in that room. Bill, are you watching?
I'm sure he is.
I'm sure he is.
Okay, we got to take that break. Quick break. But when we come back, what's Rex's favorite word? You can be sure it won't be simple. Please stay with us.
I think the only silly people that exist in Newfoundland are those that go and stay. There's an old joke which says, how do you get 40 Newfoundlanders in a Volkswagen? And the answer is, of course, you tell them that it's going to Toronto. And my particular answer is, how do you get 80 in a Volkswagen? And you tell them it's coming back.
Welcome back. Rex is here for a special Thursday night with your questions. Next up, this one's coming in on tape from British Columbia. Okay. Watch this.
Hi there, Rex. This is Nick in Vancouver. What is your favorite word in the English language and why?
Nice of Nick to ask it, actually. I'll give you the word, first of all. I don't think I even know how to pronounce it because I've never heard it. It's calcenterous. The reason it's my favorite word...
Wait a minute. How do you spell it?
C-H-A-L-C-E-N-T-E-R-O-U-S. Calcenterous. The reason it's my favorite word...
That's the second different way you've pronounced it already.
I don't know how to pronounce it. I've never heard it. And it's not even listed in the... Except the big Oxford Dictionary, you will find it.
Okay.
The reason it's my favorite word, A is for its meaning. It means bowels of brass. They also used to call a guy in the ancient world bronze guts. But the reason that I like it is that the editor, the main scholar, rather, of the Newfoundland Dictionary of English, which is a huge scholarly work, wrote a thing for the Dictionary of Canadian Biography in which he described a Methodist minister as having calcentrous courage. And the Canadian editor of the Canadian Biography wrote back saying there is no such word. And Story, George Story is his name, explained indeed there was, and it meant bowels of brass. A good host should have calcentrous bowels.
All right. I don't know how you managed to get Newfoundland into every answer.
I could do it.
You know, if the Newfoundland Labrador tourism industry wasn't good enough for those incredible ads they have, you're doing
maybe
a
you
good
see
job.
I'm turning down the Senate seat because I have another job.
Yeah, that's right. All right, next one. Nick Dalbeck from Vancouver. Why are Canadians still electing parties when they should be electing independent members of Parliament?
Well, I would think that it isn't the Canadians in this case, and I wouldn't be soft on the electorate either, because sometimes they can be lazy in what they do. I think that the people who stand for office have become so accommodating to their own weaknesses and lack of courage. It has become now, it is normative not to have nerve. It is normative to accept the whip. You ask someone, you know, full adult who has the backing of maybe 60,000 people in the district a straight question, he's looking over his shoulder wondering whether in this current context this Jason Kenney would approve, or 30 years ago Mark Lalonde. The members themselves have character. I don't care if they're in the party or independent. It's the individual. And the absence of courage, the absence of independent voices. I mean, go back to the last Parliament. Peter Stoffler was probably the only name, with maybe Keith Martin as a secondary one, that you identified as half speaking the truth most of the time, out of plus 300? No. Go back to our first question, institutions. We've got to get more character in the people that are there, and they should have the guts of their own supporters.
Well, as you say, many of them got character, so as they suddenly lose it.
As soon as they go there. The job isn't worth the trade.
All right, last question for this. It's coming in on tape. Watch this.
Hi, I'm Janet Keith from Etobicoke. Rex, if you were Prime Minister, what 3 things would you do in your first 100 days?
All right. Now you got to deliver, buddy, and you better answer.
Okay, I will. Janet,
give a direct answer.
Janet, the first thing I would do is I would call as many people as I could to make sure the delusion was shared. That's the first step, okay? That this was not just me. If I was, indeed, or if the Canadian public in a fit of masochism had done that to themselves, the second thing I'd do is this. This is only a process thing. I'd make everyone, including myself, who stands up in Parliament, put away the written stuff in advance, put away the talking points, put away all pre-script. I would make it a rule. You can't do that. Third thing I would do, I would institute, as Prime Minister, every 6 months, actually, State of Canada. We never get from our leadership a description or an analysis of the state of the country in a coherent and a regularized form. We do not emphasize the unity of our own country to the highest office that we have. Our politicians shy away from any real statements. They play their games in politics. Prime Minister has one great advantage over everybody else. He leverages the entire discussion. He is the entire example. State of the Union for Canada, get rid of the prefab speeches, and check to make sure it's not a psychiatric delusion that I'm under if I'm Prime Minister. The first thing is most important, by the way.
Yeah, I'll say. All right. This has been fun, sir.
It's been real fun for me, and I was Prime Minister, what, 30 seconds?
Yes, you were. And you delivered on your three big promises of what you do. It's been fun. We will do it again in the months ahead. Thanks for all your questions. There were many, and in fact, we'll do a few more on a special web extra that you can find online after tonight's program ends. That's at cbcnews.ca/The National. As for tonight's National, we'll be back in a moment with this story.